Okay, welcome back, students. Hope you're doing well. And today's the day we're getting to see how the elements that we've learned regarding counterpoint connect to 18th century harmony. So in a sense, we're moving forward in time from the 16th century into the 18th century, and we're going to see how that connects to the 21st century. So all of these seemingly very old, archaic art forms, well, actually, they are alive and well in the music of today. So let's jump forward a bit into a song from your textbook. This is chapter 11 now. This is the first example in your textbook, St. George's Windsor. As you can see, it's just a melody in the right hand and a bass line in the left hand. This is leaving out notes in between. So we're just looking at what's called a soprano bass pair. Soprano bass pair. And you'll notice that it looks a lot like what we've been studying so far in terms of, let's say, first species counterpoint, where you have one note in the right hand, one note in the left hand. Or you could think of it as one note in the soprano and one note in the bass, if you'd like to think of it that way. Okay, so what does this sound like? Let's hear it up an octave. Okay. Okay, this is making the point that, well, actually, even though this is older than, it's still quite old, but it's not as old as the art forms we've been studying in terms of cantus firmus and counterpoint, but it is similar in a lot of ways in the way that the voices move. So take a look at each soprano bass pair. So this is one soprano bass pair. How does that compare to this one? Well, you're going to say, well, that's just the same thing. And you would be absolutely right. That's what that R stands for, meaning repeat or repetition. Okay, compare this soprano bass pair to this one. Look at the way that the voices move. Well, this moves out and this moves out. So up and down. Okay, so that is right. Contrary motion, where both voices move away. What about when both voices move towards each other? Okay. This is looking all very familiar. Even though it's not 16th century counterpoint, it is very similar in a way. Okay, what about this, where the A moves down to F, F moves down to D. This is by a third, and this is by a third. Oh, right, that would be parallel motion, not similar motion, because they're moving by the same interval of a third. By the way, is it okay to have parallel intervals here? Well, this is going from third to third. Oh yeah, we like parallel thirds. They work nicely. Okay, let's keep it moving here. So this is, oh, that moves down, this moves up. Oh, that's contrary. Oh, this is all looking very similar. And oh, speaking of similar, this moves up, but this is by a second, and this is by a large leap. So of course, that would make similar motion. And again, you want to check, well, do we like similar motion? Can't that get us into trouble? Well, this is going from a perfect interval to an imperfect consonant. So actually, this works fine. Let me play that again for you. This is repetition, contrary motion, contrary, parallel, contrary, and similar. So even though, let's say if I were to sit down and play this song, I'd probably fill out the notes with some other, fill out the chords with some other notes. Okay, there, I'm filling in. I'm assuming I have a good guess about what the harmony should be. But in terms of the outer voices, the soprano and the bass, this is looking a lot like what we've studied already. Imagine that each one of these were a whole note, and this was first species counterpoint. Well, that was the very first week in this course. So we're seeing that these ideas connect. to later periods. Okay, so let's hang on to that. Knowing that, then you are able to give this a try. Try it number 1. It's asking you to fill in these blanks here. Okay, so basically do the same thing that you've already had. Now, there's one type of motion that we did not go over. That's where one voice stays the same and the other moves, and that's exactly what they've given you here. So they fill in the first one, the one that you haven't reviewed yet, where one voice stays the same and the other moves. All right, so that would be oblique motion. Notice that each of these refers to the motion in between the voices. All right, so you're thinking from one soprano bass pair to the next. Okay, so let's make that your homework and go ahead and correct this. You can fill out the triangles the way we're used to seeing them. Triangles for dissonance. And let's go ahead and circle our perfect consonants. 8, 5. And why is that? Well, the same principles that we studied in 16th century counterpoint, well, those will hold true for the most part in 18th century. Okay, so you want to correct for that and then fill in the blanks. Okay, that should feel pretty natural at this point. Okay, but let's try to connect this to some new thoughts. Okay, so in terms of what you've seen and where we're going, what you're used to seeing is, let's say you have a cantus firmus here in the lower voice. This would be, remember, it always ends re, do, 2, 1. And what is that met with? Exactly, T, do. That's scale degree 7, moving to scale degree 1. That is a cadence in 16th century counterpoint. It's just the way we do it. It's the way we learn it. Now, is it that simple in 18th century counterpoint? Well, there's some similar properties, but the ending will look a little different and sound a little different. For the most part, this is our goal, to end on the tonic in the soprano voice, tonic in the bass. That doesn't always happen, but that is a good goal in general. Here they have it flipped, where this is the cantus firmus, re, do, and this is the counterpoint, T, do, but this is the same idea. 18th century counterpoint, or really harmony and voice leading, is similar. Notice that, well, we've gotten rid of the idea of cantus firmus, so we're not given a melody that we need to harmonize with. However, there is a kind of formula at the ends of phrases, and we still have these cadences. That's a very common sound. Or that has a good sense of completion, that we're setting up a period, or the end of our paragraph, let's say, or the end of our essay. What's a kind of punctuation? So in general, you're going to see in the bass, sol, do, or sol, do, could go either direction. So that's scale degree 5, moving to scale degree 1 here. Sol, do. Okay, that's going to be met with, in the soprano, either Ti, do, like you're used to seeing, or re, do. When you do this, when you have 5 moving to 1, 5 moving to 1 in both these examples, and you're ending with do, the scale degree 1, in your upper voice, this is called a perfect, authentic cadence. We're going to learn more about that later, different kinds of cadences. We'll learn about imperfect authentic cadences. We'll learn about half cadences. We'll learn about plagal cadences. But this is the most final sounding cadence. So you might even have in a piece of music several different cadences, just like you would have in a paragraph several different sentences, and you need to end those sentences with either a question mark, a period, or an exclamation mark. But at the very end, you're going to get a period, most likely. You're going to get a really final sounding phrase that lets the reader know that you're done saying what you need to say. Well, same is true in music. That we can have different kinds of cadences or stopping points, but in the end, we will often end with this formula of sorts: sol do in the bass and ti do in the soprano, ending with do in both voices. Okay, you can see how this is very similar. This is exactly what we have here. We're ending with do or scale degree 1 in both voices, scale degree 1 in both voices, scale degree 1, scale degree 1. So this is the most final sounding cadence. Okay, PAC, perfect authentic cadence. We'll come back to that. What about other kinds of cadences? Well, here they give you another example. Again, this is a little, I'm working ahead a little bit, but this is good that you get introduced to it early. Now, this is a piece of music that I play every Sunday morning. This comes right after the offertory. It's called the doxology, and the hymn tune, they call it the Old 100th. Okay, this is a cadence, but it's not a really final sounding cadence. This sounds sort of like a halfway mark. So maybe this is a question mark, let's say, or maybe it's a colon and it's leading to another sort of sentence that's starting again. But it certainly doesn't sound like the end to me. And why is that? Well, here we're in the key of G. Do, do, ti, la, so, do, re, mi. Well, it doesn't end with do in the soprano. It doesn't sound very final. What if I substituted that with do at the end? I think you would agree it sounds different. Do, do, ti, la, so, do, re, do. This sounds really final. Okay, so just by substituting that third scale degree, do, re, mi, this is a different kind of cadence now. It's certainly going to scale degree 1 in the bass, so this would be a 1 chord. We'll learn about our Roman numerals, or be reminded about our Roman numerals shortly. But what about in the soprano? Well, here, of course, we have the third. Because it's similar, we're still going to call it an authentic cadence. So it's AC, just like we had PAC up here, perfect authentic cadence. This is still an authentic cadence, but because of this third in the soprano, we're going to call it an imperfect authentic cadence. Imperfect authentic cadence. So still a stopping point. You're still going from 5 to 1, which is suggestive of the chord, the function 5 moving to 1, so dominant to tonic. But of course, the soprano has changed things there. It has made it less final sounding. Okay, so both of these are good examples of things that look familiar to us from what we've been studying in 16th century counterpoint. Look at here we have an octave. You're saying, well, octave to octave, isn't that parallel? No, this is a repetition. That's okay. Here we have contrary motion, and then, similar motion to a third. Okay, that's okay. So, and then parallel thirds, that's okay. What about moving to the fifth here? Well, this is moving in contrary motion. This is fine. Okay, so as you can see, things are still working like we've seen. Okay, so this is a good summary of this first section. It says, note-to-note counterpoint in 18th century style generally follows the conventions of species counterpoint, which we studied, in regard to contrapuntal motion and the connection of consonant intervals. Contrapuntal motion and the connection of consonant intervals. Notice all these consonant intervals here. Differences include more oblique motion, repeated notes, new cadence types that we just went over, and a bass that implies stronger harmonic motion. What does that mean? Harmonic motion? Well, this is moving from 5 to 1. So suggestive of this dominant harmony. Okay, good review. All right, so I do want us to get it to try it number 2 at least this week, and then we'll finish the chapter next week. Okay, so but wait, there's more. We need to start filling in some of those notes, right? So when speaking of the 5/7 or the dominant 7, okay, if we were to have all the notes of the chord, we're back in F major here. Go ahead and go to your keyboard and try these 4 notes out. So, ti, re, fa. Don't forget your B flat. Now you can hear there's a lot of dissonance here. It's not very content where it is. This chord really wants to go back home. It's sort of like going to your work, right? It can be a dissonant place going to work, but it's necessary, isn't it? It pays the bills. It makes sure that you can have a roof over your head and put some food on the table. So it's necessary, but that's not where we want to live usually. So eventually we'll come back home. So that idea of 5/7, think of it as a dissonant place, maybe your work, and you're coming back home. Okay, what makes it dissonant? What causes that dissonance? Well, for one, you have the distance between the bottommost note, the root, and the seventh. Root and the seventh. Now you might be wondering, well, what are these numbers here? These are the scale degrees, right? 5/7 2 4, or sol ti re fa. Same idea. Okay. When we're referring to the root, then, and we're counting above, then we're referring to the chord. So root, third, fifth, seventh. So the distance between that bottom note and the top note is a minor 7. That is a dissonant interval. If you were to take that bottom note and move it up an octave, so now you have a B flat in the bass, well, that would also be dissonant. That would be a major second. Okay, it's not a minor second, which is very dissonant, but it's still major second. It's not totally content where it is. It wants to move. What are the other dissonant things about the chord? Well, you have the distance between E and B flat. Ti, fa. Go ahead and find that on the piano. And if you count carefully, you're going to see this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 half steps, or 3 whole steps, right? Otherwise known as tritone, 3 whole steps. The devil's interval is very dissonant. This is very not content where it is. This 4th scale degree wants to resolve down. The bottom note wants to resolve up. When they do that, both of them are moving by half step. Look at what they resolve to. You're resolving to do and mi, which is almost all the way there for a tonic chord. Same goes if you invert the interval. Let's say you took that note, a bottom note, moved it up an octave. What do you have? Well, still a tritone. That T, the 7th scale degree, wants to move up, and the 4th scale degree wants to move down. Okay, and what happens when you get there? Well, again, this is part of a 1 chord. Okay, so everything about this, from the outermost notes to the inner notes, it's a chord that's not happy where it is. Even though there's a major third there between the root and the third, well, it still wants to move. Like, those notes want to go somewhere. So here you can see all 4 of those notes moving, resolving. Okay, now this is a bit of a formula that you want to memorize. That basically every time you have the 4th scale degree, which in a dominant chord is the chordal 7th. The chordal 7th. So it's in the chord and it's a 7th away from the root. Every time you have that 4th scale degree, it wants to resolve downwards by step. It's 1 little half step away. Fa, mi. Okay, here you hear it in the bottom voice, but still it wants to resolve down. Fa, mi. Just like that, leading tone wants to resolve up. Ti, do. Ti, do. Okay, these voices want to move. Okay, so let's look at those figures and what they suggest here. Okay. Here we have some examples of different kinds of cadences. In fact, I'll just skip ahead to this page. I'd like you to, in a sense, memorize this formula. If they're teaching you the distance between the soprano and the bass, so it's a good formula. It's a good place to start with these kind of cadences and chord progressions. That if you see a minor seventh between the soprano and the bass, well, that's going to imply a 5/7 chord. And that 5/7 chord is going to want to move to 1. If you see a diminished fifth, not to be confused with an augmented fourth, the diminished fifth, that's going to be suggesting what's called the 5/6/5, moving to 1. We'll review these chords in a moment. This is the inversion. Augmented fourth is the inversion of diminished fifth. So if you have an augmented fourth, that's suggestive of a 5/4/2 moving to 1/6. I would write this out for yourself. I would study it. I would make sure you remember what the progression is. This will definitely show up on your final. You should endeavor to figure this out. Play it on the keyboard. Try to play it in different keys. Okay, and this is what this is asking you to complete. So, for example, the distance between that soprano and that bass, well, that's a minor seventh, isn't it? Okay, that minor seventh is going to want to collapse. The seventh wants to move down, the chordal seventh, and the root wants to move up. Okay, another way to say it is the fourth scale degree, fa, wants to resolve to mi. The soul wants to move up to do. Okay, you have both at the same time. Okay, and what is that suggestive of? Well, you look up here. This is your chart. Well, minor seventh. Oh, right. Okay, that's root position. 5/7 moving to 1. Okay, so be reminded. It might have been a while since you've taken your first semester theory, but be reminded. Okay, so let's say we have a 1 chord. What would be so that would be root position, right? So let's go over triads. Let's say we have a 1 chord. Root position, 1. Okay, what about first inversion? Okay, what does that look like? Okay, well, still a 1, but it's with the third and the bass. That's called a 1/6. Second inversion, you move that bottom up. Now you have the fifth of the chord in the bass. That's called a 1/6/4. All right, these are triads. Okay, here we're dealing with the 1/6 or the 1. All right, what about seventh chords? Well, let's look at seventh chords. And where do we typically see them? With use of the 5 chord. So here's root, first inversion, second inversion, third inversion. Okay. Again, this would be something to memorize if you haven't already. So let's say root position would be 5/7. Okay, if you take that bottom note, move it up an octave, you're calling it a 5/6/5. If you do it again, you take that bottom note, move it up an octave. Now you have the fifth in the bass. Now you have a 5/4/3. And a third inversion, you keep going. There's one more because there's one more note in the chord. Now you have the seventh, the chordal seventh in the bass. That's a 5/4/2. Again, this would be good information to put on a card, memorize it for yourself, write it out a few times, make sure you understand it. So root position triad, let's say we're in C major, root position. That's 1, 1/6, 1/6/4. If you do it again, you keep going, you get back to root position. All right, what about seventh chords? Here's 5/7 in root position. 5/6/5, that's first inversion. 5/4/3, that's second inversion. 5/4/2, that's third inversion. Okay, if that's a little bit rusty, I would really recommend right now, today, going to a keyboard and reviewing triads and seventh chords. Make sure you understand why they are written the way they're written. Okay, that's from your first semester in theory. Okay, so now the question for you is, when doing this homework, what is the distance between these two notes and how should it resolve? What is the distance between these two notes and how should it resolve? Oh, this one's even harder. This is F sharp minor. Be advised, F sharp minor. What is the distance between these two notes and how does it resolve? What is the distance between these two? What is the distance between these two? Right, be careful of the key signature. Don't forget the key signature. This is A major. This is F sharp minor. Okay, this is a good place to stop for today. Spend some good quality time with this page, 214. And again, if you're feeling a little rusty about your triads and seventh chords, spend time with that page. All right. And as always, feel free to reach out with any questions. All right. I hope you're all having a wonderful day, and I shall see you soon in cyberspace. Okay. See you there.